Texas was a land of dust, heat, and lawlessness, where the sound of spurs on a saloon floor could turn into the echo of gunfire before the next breath. And among all the gunslingers who carved their names into Western legend, one name stood apart: John Wesley Hardin. To some, he was the deadliest man ever to draw a gun. To others, a misunderstood soul shaped by violence and vengeance. But whether you called him hero, villain, or madman, one thing was certain: John Wesley Hardin's story was written in blood. He was born in 1853 in Bonov, Texas, the son of a traveling Methodist preacher. His father named him after the founder of Methodism, John Wesley, hoping his boy would follow a godly path. But young Hardin's destiny would veer far from the pulpit. The world he was born into was a land still trembling from the aftershocks of the Civil War, a place where guns replaced law and grudges replaced reason. Hardin grew up fast. He was bright, articulate, and could quote scripture as easily as he could aim a revolver. But he had a temper, a restless streak that burned beneath his quiet exterior. By the time he was 15, that temper had already drawn first blood. It began with a fight, a simple wrestling match with a black man named Major Holzhausen, a former slave. When Hardin won, witnesses claimed Holzhausen threatened to come back armed. Whether that was true or not, Hardin later claimed he acted in self-defense when he ambushed and killed him. It was his first killing, and the beginning of a life that would spiral deeper into violence than even he could have imagined. After that, Texas law came after him, and Hardin went on the run. The boy preacher's son became a fugitive before he was old enough to vote. He drifted across the plains, his revolver his only companion, and by the time he was 20, he was said to have killed more than a dozen men. But in those chaotic post-war years, law in Texas was a loose term. The Reconstruction government was despised by many Southerners, and Hardin saw himself as resisting occupation rather than committing murder. He joined up with outlaw gangs, gamblers, and cowboys who shared his defiance. His name began to spread, whispered in saloons, printed in broadsheets: John Wesley Hardin, the fastest gun in Texas. Yet for all his reputation, Hardin wasn't just a trigger-happy outlaw. He was educated, articulate, and deeply conscious of his image. In his later writings, he insisted that most of his killings were acts of self-defense, that the world had forced his hand. But whatever his motives, his methods were brutal. One story, often told and retold, claimed he once shot a man simply for snoring too loudly in the next hotel room. Hardin himself denied it, saying the story was exaggerated, but it captured the way people saw him: dangerous, unpredictable, and quick to kill. Throughout his early 20s, Hardin's life became a blur of gunfights and escapes. He rode with Wild Bill Hickok for a time in Abilene, Kansas. Though the two men's friendship was uneasy, even Hardin seemed to admire Hickok's cool composure, something he himself lacked. Bill was calm as a May morning, Hardin later wrote, but I was too quick with my temper. That temper would define him. In one violent episode, Hardin and his cousins were ambushed by Texas State Police, a shootout that left several men dead. In another, he killed a deputy who tried to arrest him. Each death added to his notoriety, and soon every lawman in Texas wanted him dead or in chains. But Hardin had a charm that matched his ferocity. He married young, to a woman named Jane Bowen, and even as he fled from one county to another, he wrote her tender letters. For a time, he tried to settle down as a cattle driver, taking her and their children to Florida and Alabama. Yet peace was always short-lived. Trouble followed him like a shadow. In 1877, that shadow finally caught up. After years on the run, Hardin was tracked down aboard a train in Pensacola, Florida. The Texas Rangers had been hunting him for months, and when they cornered him, he reached for his gun. But before he could fire, a ranger struck him over the head with a pistol. John Wesley Hardin, the most wanted man in Texas, was finally in custody. He was brought back to Texas in chains, his reputation preceding him like a storm. Newspapers across the South called him a monster, a killer with 27 men to his name, though Hardin himself claimed he had slain only in self-defense. The courts were unmoved. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Behind the walls of the Huntsville Penitentiary, Hardin's legend should have ended, but instead, it evolved. Stripped of his gun, the man who had lived by violence found solace in books. He studied law, read history, and even taught Sunday school. In the letters he wrote from prison, there's a hint of remorse, not for the men he killed, but for the wasted potential of his life. In 1894, after serving 16 years, Hardin was released for good behavior. He was 41 years old, older, calmer, and eager to prove he had changed. The boy who'd grown up with a revolver in his hand was now a man with a lawyer's mind. He moved to El Paso and opened a law practice, hoping to bury his outlaw past once and for all. But the West wasn't ready to let him go, and perhaps he wasn't ready to let it go either. Old habits, old grudges, and new enemies began to circle. Hardin gambled, drank, and once again carried a gun. He found himself drawn into disputes with local lawmen, especially one named John Selman, a former ranger who saw through Hardin's polished act. Their feud began over a woman, or more precisely, over Hardin's involvement with Beulah Adams, Selman's son's wife. El Paso was a small town, and rumors spread fast. Words turned to threats, threats to tension, and then, on the night of August 19, 1895, it all came to a violent end. Hardin was in the Acme Saloon, playing dice and drinking whiskey, when Selman walked through the door. Without a word, Selman drew his revolver and shot Hardin in the back of the head. Hardin's glass shattered. His body slumped to the floor, and the man once feared across Texas lay dead before his dice stopped rolling. He was 42 years old. It was a quiet, almost anticlimactic end for a man who had survived countless gunfights. Selman claimed self-defense, arguing that Hardin had threatened him days earlier. The case went to trial, but before it could conclude, Selman himself was killed gunned down in another barroom dispute. In the lawless West, even justice had a way of dying violently. John Wesley Hardin's story is one of contradictions. He was a preacher's son who became a killer, a fugitive who became a lawyer, a man who quoted scripture before drawing his gun. He killed at least 27 men, possibly more, but also spoke of honor, faith, and redemption. In his autobiography, written during his final years, Hardin tried to rewrite his legend, to paint himself not as a murderer, but as a man shaped by the chaos of his time. Perhaps there was truth in that. The Texas of his youth was a land torn by war and Reconstruction, where men carried revolvers because the law couldn't protect them. In that world, morality was often measured in survival. Hardin was both a product and a prisoner of that world. Today, his grave in the El Paso's Concordia Cemetery is marked by a tall granite headstone. It reads simply, John Wesley Hardin, 1853 to 1895. If he wasn't quick, he'd be dead. Visitors still leave coins and bullets at his grave, tributes to a man who became a symbol of the West's violent duality, the thin line between justice and vengeance, sin and survival. The legend of John Wesley Hardin reminds us that the Wild West was never about black and white, heroes and villains. It was about people flawed, desperate, and human, trying to carve meaning out of a world that offered none. And for Hardin, that world ended the same way it began, with the echo of a gunshot and the silence that followed. Thank you for watching Crimes Through Time. If this story fascinated you, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more journeys into history's darkest legends. And tell us in the comments, was John Wesley Hardin a cold-blooded killer, or just a man born in the wrong time? We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, stay curious, stay safe,